What is up, guys? Dr. Shepard here. Today's episode sponsored by Sonic himself. Actually not, but I wish it was. So I'm just gonna wear the shirt instead. Anyways, today's topic is going to be panic attacks. And I know this is something that we've talked about a little bit before, but what I wanna do is kind of walk you through all of the techniques and give you kind of like a one-stop shop on how to deal with panic attacks when you are having one. And then at the end, we'll talk a little bit about how you can help somebody else through a panic attack if they're suffering through one. It is really hard to remember all of this stuff when you're in the midst of a panic attack. So the way I get around that is by practicing and knowing what you need to do before you have to do it, and also writing stuff down. So I have people carry around with them a little index card that says what their steps will be if they start to have a panic attack. Another topic that I know we've talked about before, but it's totally worth reiterating this, is that acceptance of anxiety is incredibly difficult, but absolutely crucial to getting through a panic attack. So the best way to ensure that you're gonna continue to have a panic attack and that you're gonna have more panic attacks is to try and get rid of the panic attacks. So what I want you to do is remind yourself that it's not something that will hurt you, that you will get through the panic attack, that you've made it through them in the past, and that you are surviving the worst of it right now. And then when you embrace the idea that you are safe and it is okay, you can open up to the panic attack. And you may have to come up with a metaphor to remind yourself to open up to the anxiety. And I feel like that's when it really clicked with me. So I'll share a couple of my favorites. So the first is the Chinese finger trap. So have you ever played with one of those toys? I need to get one for like demo purposes, but it's like a little straw thing that is woven and you stick your fingers in either side and you push them in. And if you try to pull them out, it gets stuck tighter. But if you push your fingers in, then the woven part loosens up and you can pull your fingers out. That's a lot like the anxiety. You have to lean into it in order to be released. The other feeling that I kind of liken it to is you're about to go into a panic attack. You can feel it starting and you kind of think of that sensation if you've ever been on a roller coaster and you're like right at the top and you know you're about to go over and you're like, oh, this is the end. This is it. I'm done. Time to go. Tell my mom I love her. And you just kind of embrace it and you go down the other side. You end up having a blast. Maybe the panic attack won't be quite as fun, but that same idea of like, well, here I am at the top. There's nowhere to go but down. That's what I want you to think of during a panic attack. Another metaphor that kind of helps me is thinking about riding waves in the ocean. If you've ever been sort of deeper out in the ocean, you know that it's better to just ride the waves rather than trying to crash into every single one of them and like power through them. Sometimes it also helps me to imagine that there's bubbles floating around me and those are my thoughts and feelings, or imagine yourself kind of laying on your back in the water and just kind of floating and feeling that anxiety all around you, but you're still there and you're still grounded. Okay, so I could probably make an entire video with just metaphors, but I won't do that to you because I appreciate you. Anyways, so these kind of metaphors are things that you can write down on your index card, along with phrases like, you're safe, you've been here before, you've gotten through it in the past, the worst is already here. Things that you can use to kind of remind yourself when you're in the midst of a panic attack. So the next thing to do is kind of bring yourself into a quiet area with low light, a little less stimulation, if at all possible. I know it's definitely not something you can always do, and it's certainly not required, but it can kind of help to, again, ground you if you are in a space that's comfortable and quiet where you can just let the panic attack do its thing. All right, so you're in your quiet space, you're working on acceptance of the panic attack, which is always something that you're gonna have to work on. It's usually not a switch flipping. If it were that simple, honestly, we'd all be doing it and we'd be great. But it's more of a process. And so I want you to keep practicing that acceptance, even if it feels like you're not getting it right away. So you're leaning into that discomfort, you are ready to go over the edge of that roller coaster, and there are a couple of exercises that you can do if you have a moment to do them and the space to do them that can help you navigate that panic attack. Again, it's important to try to switch your frame of mind from I'm doing these exercises to get rid of the panic attack, instead to I'm doing these exercises to help guide myself through this panic attack and accept it and embrace it and come out on the other side. It's a process, I know, not easy. And the reason I'm giving you a couple of different strategies is because different things work for different people and different things will work during different panic attacks. So even within the same person, you may find that one day a grounding technique works best and another day a breathing technique works best. So let's talk about grounding techniques first. So the idea is that during a panic attack, you are off in some land that is not the present. And if you've ever been there, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Your mind is spinning up all these horrible ideas. You feel like you're gonna die. You feel like you're going nuts. So your brain is not thinking about the present moment. And if you were in the present moment, well, you wouldn't be panicking because in the present moment, you're actually okay. It's all of these potential fears about things that might happen in the future. I might have a heart attack, I might go crazy, I can't stand this. Those are the things that are really propagating the panic attack. So the idea of grounding is to bring yourself back to the present moment. And you can do this in a bunch of different ways. The simplest being just looking around the room and noticing things of a certain color. So maybe you have a certain color written down on your index card. So maybe I'm gonna look around the room and find everything that's blue. And when I find those blue items, I need to then describe them. Okay, I see a blue Sonic shirt. It's pretty badass. It makes me feel like I'm back in the 90s. I feel happy with my Sega Genesis and all is well with the world. Just as an example. So another grounding exercise that I think is helpful is looking for 5 things that you can see and naming each of those objects and describing them in detail. Then 4 things that you can touch and the same thing. So you want to describe the textures and what the object is. Then you want to think about 3 things that you can hear. So what are 3 distinct sounds that you can pick up in the environment? And it might be hard to detect those things, so you really have to concentrate on it, and that can help get you through the panic attack. And then you want to name 2 things that you can smell. So 2 distinct smells. So maybe you have your deodorant in the bathroom and you go and smell that. Describe that scent in as much detail as you can. And then maybe you smell your coworker's perfume next to you or something like that. So you want to describe that again. It can even be something more subtle, like just the smell of the air around you or the smell of the textbook that you have nearby. And then finally, you want to describe 1 thing that you can taste. This might just be your own bad breath, whatever works. But if you have something on you like a mint or a hard candy, that can be super helpful. Maybe some coffee, something with a strong taste that can kind of almost shock your taste buds. And again, you want to describe this in as much detail as possible. So again, to summarize, that's going to be 5 things you can see, 4 things you can touch, 3 things you can hear, 2 things you can smell, and 1 thing you can taste. Obviously that's complicated. The idea is to keep your mind working, but it's something that you'll want to write down on an index card beforehand. But that being said, the order of the sensations or the various objects that you use doesn't really matter, so whatever works for you. If you're a chef working in a restaurant, you can do 5 things you can taste, go for it. I'm not trying to tell you how to live your life. Another example of a grounding exercise is doing something like a body scan meditation. So this is something you could easily look up on YouTube. I actually have a body scan video a couple videos back. I think it's about 20 minutes, but you can really do any amount of time that you want. So you could make it a really quick body scan, and there are videos for that. You could make it a very long body scan. There are hour-long ones that you can do, and you're focusing on the different parts of your body in a systematic way. And you're focusing on the different areas of your body in a systematic way. So like, for example, I might start with my left foot and notice the sensations in my left foot, the feeling of my foot on the ground, the sensation of the shoe around my foot, then move up to my ankle, up to my calf, all the way to my knee and feeling the sensations in my joints. And then maybe I move to the right side and do the right leg. Then I move up to my thighs, my hips, my torso, my arms, my neck, my face. So as I'm going through this body scan, I'm noticing the different sensations, making space for the sensations. And what ends up happening is that you distract yourself, and also you tend to relax the areas of your body that you're focusing on in the moment. So you end up kind of relieving some of the tension that's associated with a panic attack. All right, so let's talk breathing exercises. There are lots of different breathing exercises you can do. I'll just kind of describe 2 of my favorites. But really anything works that's gonna regulate some of your breathing. So during a panic attack, we tend to hyperventilate. So we breathe in and out very quickly. And this can cause us to blow off extra carbon dioxide. And believe it or not, you actually need some carbon dioxide in your blood. Otherwise, you start to feel tingly hands and feet, and you start to feel lightheaded. So if you can regulate that breathing, and as you can imagine, those sensations of dizziness, lightheadedness, tingling in the hands and feet, all of those uncomfortable sensations are gonna serve to propagate the panic attack. So sometimes with these breathing exercises, we can interrupt that cycle and slow down someone's breathing so that it stops reinforcing the panic attack. So one method that people find helpful is called box breathing. And that's pretty easy to remember. You can even draw a box out on your index card. But basically you breathe in for a count of 4, hold it for a count of 4, out for a count of 4, and hold it for a count of 4. And you keep going. So let's try it together. So we're gonna inhale for 4, 2, 3, 4, hold it for 4, 2, 3, 4. Exhale for 4, 2, 3, 4, and hold it for 2, 3, 4. Easy as that. So you keep repeating it until you feel like your breathing is under control and the panic attack starts to subside. Some people don't like that breathing pattern. For some people, it can make them feel a little bit dizzy. And I found for those people, a shorter inhale and longer exhale tends to do the trick. So that's another breathing technique that you can use. So you would inhale for, like, say a count of 4 or whatever feels comfortable, and then exhale for slightly longer than that. So if you're inhaling for a count of 4, you might exhale for a count of 6. So let's practice that one. So we'll inhale for 2, 3, 4, and exhale for 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Also fairly simple, and you just keep repeating it until you're feeling better. All right, so those are a couple of breathing techniques that I find helpful. Another technique that I like to use is doing something physical during a panic attack. So some people find that it can be really helpful to discharge some of that anxious energy. So doing things that are repetitive, like running, doing jumping jacks, even just lifting your arms up and down can be really helpful during a panic attack. Again, this can help ground you because you're focusing on what your body is doing in the present, and it can also help you channel those difficult physical sensations into something that's a little bit less scary. And I know we talked about acceptance a little bit earlier, but let's talk about a technique that I use to remind myself to accept the anxiety. So I call this the bring it bitch technique, but you can call it really anything you like. Bring it punk, bring it jerk, bring it, I don't know, whatever. You can call it a nice name if you want. Anyways, but the technique is when you feel a panic attack starting, or even if you're in the middle of a panic attack, you put your arms out wide, face to the sky, and yell, "Bring it, bitch!" or something like that. Now, if you're at your job or if you live with somebody else, maybe you don't want to be screaming that, so you can do it in your head instead. But the idea is to, again, prompt you to accept the anxiety. And it also helps ground you a little bit because it's weird and you're being loud. And then finally, it's kind of funny. Like, you're just breaking the seriousness of the panic attack. And I find that laughing at myself, even when I'm feeling really awful and anxious, can sometimes help me break that feeling a little bit. All right, so those are probably the most common techniques that I give people to use during a panic attack. So let's talk about if someone else is going through a panic attack. So the techniques that we talked about are things that you can absolutely teach to other people. You may have to guide them through it, especially if they're in the midst of a panic attack, because if you've been through one, you know it's not easy to think during a panic attack. So the first thing to know is that everybody's different. So even if your panic attacks feel a certain way and you like a certain amount of support, that might be different from your friend's panic attacks. So the best thing to do is, if you know someone has panic attacks, ask them what works for them and how you can be most helpful when they're having a panic attack. If you stumble on somebody having a panic attack and you haven't talked about it ahead of time, it's okay to ask them how you can be helpful in, a calm voice, and ask them once, but don't keep asking them over and over again. How can I help you? What do you need? What are you doing? Like, that's just gonna stress them out. You wanna talk with the person in a slow, calm, quiet voice, and you really want to be kind of predictable. It sounds silly, but you don't want to make sudden movements because that's going to stress them out. They're already on high alert and they're picking up everything in the environment. So you want to move slowly, purposefully, and speak quietly and calmly. You also want to use short sentences and be concise, and it's okay to repeat things because they may not really hear it the first time. I also find that just being there physically with someone can sometimes be the most helpful thing. If you can be seated with them, that's ideal. You want to be around their eye level or even lower, and you want to be seated kind of close to them, but not touching unless that's something that they've said they're okay with. So some people do take as needed medicines given by their doctors. So that's something, if their doctor is recommending that, you can help them get that medicine and take the medicine, maybe give them water that they need to take the medicine. And then you can lead them through some of the grounding techniques we talked about. So the looking around for any colors, you can help them do the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, running through all of the different senses. You can help them through a breathing exercise like the box breathing or the inhale with the longer exhale. And just know that, like I said earlier, everybody's different. Every panic attack is different. So if you find that what you're doing is not helpful to the person, maybe change tactics and try something different. You may not need to give them any additional prompting during the panic attack. It might be enough for you to just sit there and be quiet, and that might be what they find most helpful. It can also be really helpful to just reassure the person. Remind them quietly and calmly that I'm here with you. You're safe. The panic attack won't hurt you. You will get through this. People often think the panic attack is going to get worse, so maybe reminding them you're going through the worst of it right now and you're surviving. This is okay. It's going to be okay. We're going to get through this. You can also help them do something that will discharge that anxious energy like we talked about earlier, like encouraging them to do 20 jumping jacks with you. Finally, the bottom line is that if you ever feel concerned for somebody's safety, or if you ever feel like there might be something physically wrong with somebody, or that it might be more than a panic attack, or if you just feel like you're in over your head and you really can't help this person, you are never wrong to call for help. So you can call a crisis line, you can call an emergency number, so like 911 in the US, or you can call someone that's a friend or a family member of the person. You're never wrong for doing that. And I know people say, oh, I don't want to call 911 or I don't want to call a crisis line, it's just a panic attack. But emergency personnel are trained to handle panic attacks. They see them all the time. It's nothing to be ashamed of. It's just as valid as any physical condition. So if you need to call for help, do it. And just remember that if you are guiding your friend through a panic attack, just being there, like I said, might be all that they need. So thank you for being an awesome friend. And if there's anything else that you want to learn about panic attacks, definitely drop me a comment below. And if you haven't already, please subscribe, hit the notifications bell so you don't miss an episode. And I will see you guys next time.